I call the honourable member for Bowman.
Well, Deputy Speaker, I rise to also support this motion by my colleague, which criticises the 6-month freeze and demands that the Coalition's responses that are long known, have been taken to an election and actually proven to work back in 2003-04 be implemented again today by this government. Already introduced to those points that we reintroduce temporary protection visas, that we move to using Nauru rather than the never-never East Timor solution. We turn votes around where feasible, that we streamline review by using case officers, as UNHCR does do, rather than panels, that we return unsuccessful applicants, and particularly that we deem individuals who destroy their materials intentionally be deemed not to be refugees. This has been an issue of great pride that Australia is a nation that's based on immigration, but it actually has no part in this discussion today. And it's always interesting when government members start to pull out references they've written for fine Hazara individuals that they're getting close to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to looking for solutions to international people movements. Of course, we acknowledge that there are great people who arrive here under irregular means, and that is never ever questioned on this side of the debate, Deputy Speaker. This is fundamentally about the fairest way to identify refugees from others who move for other reasons, including the economic. And as we know, it's an extremely complex situation in parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan and also Sri Lanka. But this government has failed to prove that there were any explicit factors that occurred over the last 6 months to make it easier to assess Afghanistan. Now, what's happened in the last 6 months that you couldn't assess when we have a nation that is deploying our forces in Orozgan province? We are intimately connected to all of the conditions in Afghanistan, and how has that changed in 6 months? Well, the only thing that changed was that there was a federal election, and the Orwellianly named tough and humane strategy was actually the weak and perversely inhumane idea of locking these people up without any form of processing, simply led to massive queues in processing, which right now, of course, when this freeze is lifted, will simply have to be met. There is no evidence that this government could have processed, Deputy Speaker, people in that 6 month time frame. There is no argument why a genuine refugee could not have been recognised almost immediately under standard UNHCR processing. Let's be honest. An individual who flees, having had first-degree relatives assassinated in front of them in their own household, we are talking horrible, horrible stories. And to simply sweep them up in one large group and say we won't process for 6 months is utterly inhumane, and it's way more inhumane than the conditions that the former government faced in 2000-2001, where there were large numbers of arrivals. Now, one of the reasons why we're extremely strong on this issue, Deputy Speaker, is that those on this side of the chamber sat through the previous Prime Minister as he smugly, to every question about this issue, simply read out numbers from the then Howard era stating that those arrivals were greater. And only slowly was that smugness wiped off the face when, of course, finally these increasing numbers, under a Prime Minister that simply unpicked all of those laws, were finally even larger than that period. Now, I agree there's a large number of arrivals now, as there were in 2000-2001. But the difference is that the former Howard government came up with solutions. Right. Not only is this government not coming up with solutions, they are patently turning a blind eye to what has worked and absolutely avoiding implementing them for no other reason than they were our solutions. And so poor old Nauru has a completely constructed place for processing to occur, and the only reason Nauru is not used is because they need to find another nation to avoid actually going back and using something that worked, using something that was used by previous government. And that is bloody-mindedness, to then say we need a regional framework that has any solution available to us other than the one that worked because it came from the previous government. This notion that we need a regional framework which involves a whole host of countries simply virtually guarantees that we will never see East Timor as a valid solution. And it's terribly unfair that that nation was singled out. It is now the appearance to many that East Timor's leadership is heartless if they don't accept this current Prime Minister's solution. Where was the negotiation? It was a glass of wine, potentially with a ceremonial president, without doing all of the hard and adaptive work that would have taken weeks. But no, this government needed to go to election and they needed to get out of jail free card. It is tragic that the excuse that East Timor is a signatory to the Convention and the Protocols from 51 and 67 means that they cannot consider Nauru but they will consider any other nation. And it's wrong that Australia doesn't take the lead. As the Indonesian former president said, we provide the sugar. We should be doing way more than talking about vague solutions with a whole host of countries. We should be getting on and doing what the coalition did effectively after 2001, and that was TPVs, using a nation that's already set up for it, turning votes around where applicable, and of course returning those that are unsuccessful.
Time has expired. The question is that the amendment be agreed to.